Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian. I'm sorry. Read first. Reading first. No, okay, got it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. I'm Nancy Hershatter. I've been a member since about 2010. I've been involved with music and with coordinating, and it's been my delight to be a part of this community. Please silence your phones if you haven't done so already. We're so glad that you're able to join us this morning. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or 1000th Sunday in our midst, in person or online, we're stronger because you are with us. As we gather this morning, we respectfully acknowledge that our physical building is on the traditional land of the Paugussett people. Before we get started this morning, I invite you to greet your neighbors, either here next to you or others joining you online, and say hello. Introduce yourself to someone you haven't yet met, or wave across the room at old friends.
Welcome to the Praise House.
Okay, we can continue this at coffee hour. Let's come back together. Five, four, three, two, one. We have some announcements this morning. Whatever sentence you were in the middle of, remember it because you can continue it at coffee hour. We have some announcements this morning. The first is an announcement video, which Keith will bring up, about Music at the Ridge.
We're so happy to be performing for you at Music at the Ridge.
We're looking forward to being there and playing all of our music for you.
Just our best music.
Just the best stuff.
Yeah. So meanwhile, here's a song for you right now. It's called It's Your Life. You can spend your life requiting a passion that took a long, long time to go. Or you can fall on the knife in deliberate fashion for the love you'll never know.
So that is Mad Agnes. They will be here at 4 o'clock next Sunday. And it should be a wonderful concert. So Chalice Circles are back. You can still join Reverend Tony and others in the minister's office for a time of deep reflection and sharing based on the monthly theme Reverend Tony is using for his Sunday messages at 7 p.m. on the third Tuesday of the month. Interfaith Service for Peace. The faith communities of Clapboard Ridge Road, you may have noticed there are churches all up and down this stretch here. So the faith communities of Clapboard Ridge Road will gather at 3 p.m. on Sunday, November 12th. So that's 2 weeks from today. At Congregation B'nai Israel, 195 Clapboard Ridge Road. So that's up toward New Fairfield on the right-hand side, past the high school. Keep going. 195 Clapboard Ridge Road, Danbury, to join our voices through interfaith prayer and song. I plan to be there. Our auction, UU Danbury's online auction, is in full swing and ends Friday, November 3rd at 5 p.m. See your order of service for more information. For more information about congregational events, see your order of service, our weekly email newsletter, and the events calendar on our website at uudanbury.org. It's now time for our chalice lighting affirmation. We make this time in this place holy simply by being together with each other. And we begin by lighting the flaming chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. Please join me in reciting the words to our chalice lighting affirmation on the screen. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life. Please rise in body and or spirit and join in singing our hymn of welcome, Breaths, which is number 1001 in the Teal hymnal, which I forgot to put on your chairs, but all is not lost. Words are on the screen.
Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not under the earth. They're in the rusted trees. They're in the groaning woods. They're in the crying grass. They're in the moaning grass. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They're in the woman's breast. They're in the wailing child. They're in the sinner homes. They're in the human side. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the voice is heard.
It is so good to be together. Let's say our children's affirmation. The words are on the screen. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other. So today's theme of the service is the things that our generations of people before us have passed on to us, and the things we'll be passing on to generations of people who come after us. And after the service, we'll be having our trunk or treat. I will put on my costume. We will be having it. It's going to be downstairs, no trunks because it's raining, but we will be having it. And it turns out that traditions, trick-or-treat traditions, like trunk or treat, don't just come out of nowhere. They actually come from traditions that have evolved and changed as they've been passed down through generations. So today's video story is about exactly that, the history of trick-or-treat traditions.
So why do we celebrate Halloween? And how did it start? It's believed that Halloween traditions originated over 2,000 years ago, back around 500 BC, with the ancient Celtic people of Ireland, Scotland, and Northern Europe. They celebrated a Celtic harvest festival known as Samhain. The word Samhain comes from the Old Irish term for summer's end. Samhain divided the year into two halves. It marked the end of the summer harvest season and the beginning of the cold, dark winter. Samhain was celebrated on November 1st, with the festivities beginning at dusk on October 31st. On the night of the 31st, the Celtic people believed that the veil between the two worlds of the living and the dead was lifted, and this allowed spirits to walk the earth. Because of this belief, Samhain included rituals to honor and welcome back deceased loved ones, while also taking steps to protect against evil spirits. During the celebrations, Celtic priests, called Druids, would light sacred bonfires. Many participants wore masks and costumes, often disguised as animals, to protect themselves from evil spirits who might recognize them and want to do them harm. During Samhain, people left candles in their windows so their deceased family and friends could find their way home. They would also leave place settings for their dead loved ones at the dinner table, and put offerings of food, including apples and nuts, outside their homes for deceased friends and family to find. These traditions were the beginning of what would eventually become trick-or-treating. The Romans also contributed to the way Halloween is celebrated today, after they conquered Celtic lands and some of their customs blended with pagan traditions. The Romans celebrated a festival called Lemuria, where they performed ceremonies to rid their homes of evil spirits. Another festival they celebrated was called Parentalia, which was a 9-day festival honoring deceased family members. And they also celebrated a harvest holiday known as the Feast of Pomona, in honor of the Roman goddess Pomona, who was the goddess of gardens and fruit. They would leave nuts, apples, and other fruits out to honor her, and because of this, Halloween traditions involving apples are sometimes linked to the Feast of Pomona. More changes to the Celtic holiday of Samhain occurred as Christianity spread across Europe. Rather than banishing Samhain traditions, the Christians found it easier to convert people to their religion by incorporating Celtic celebrations into the Christian calendar. Pope Gregory III and other church leaders decided to take the Christian holiday All Saints' Day, which was a day dedicated to remembering the saints, and move it from May 13th to November 1st. All Saints' Day was also known as All Hallows' Day. The word hallow means saint, or one who is holy. Then, the church added another holiday on November 2nd, called All Souls' Day, which was a day to pray for all souls. These 3 days dedicated to remembering and honoring the dead became known as All Hallow Tide. With All Hallows' Day now taking place on November 1st, people started to call Samhain, which took place the night before on October 31st, All Hallows' Evening. It was then shortened to All Hallows' Eve, and eventually became known as Halloween. Early versions of trick-or-treating continued to evolve in England during the medieval times when people practiced the Christian custom of souling on Halloween, which was when people went from place to place begging for soul cakes, which are round spiced cakes with raisins, in exchange for praying for the souls of the cake givers' loved ones. In Scotland and Ireland, people engaged in mumming and guising, which was when people would go door to door dressed up in a disguise or a costume and recite verses or sing songs in exchange for food. Some of them would threaten mischief or tricks if they were not given food or treats. These customs help shape today's practice of trick-or-treating. Halloween became a major holiday in North America when Scottish and Irish people immigrated to the US in the 19th century. Halloween was also called Devil's Night because lots of damage and vandalism would occur. So, in 1914 in Hiawatha, Kansas, Elizabeth Krebs threw a Halloween party and invited the whole town in an attempt to prevent vandalism. Her party included costume contests, games, and even a parade. Her party was a success. With the whole town partying, there was no time for mischief, and that began the tradition of Halloween parties. For this reason, Elizabeth Krebs is sometimes called the Mother of Halloween. We decorate.
So that video, just so you know, is from a YouTube channel called Cali Fam. I'm going to invite all of the children who want to come downstairs for activities during the service to come down with me now, and we'll sing This Little Light of Mine on our way down.
I did not know about Halloween carols. I like that idea. For everyone who has asked, the Muffin Man is a good guess, but incorrect. You really need Lord of the Rings aficionados to have a shot at it. Barlaam Butterbur, the proprietor of the Prancing Pony. It's nice to have some levity. It's been and continues to be a rough time with war continuing in many places, intractable conflicts. Now there's a white Christian nationalist who's the Speaker of the House of Representatives. It's just a rough go-round. So this morning, as we get ready for milestones, I offer this for you for what is ours to do. Know that in this time, in your life, all that is yours to do is your best. And your best will be different today than it was yesterday or will be tomorrow. It will strengthen or lessen depending on the day's news, your mood, and the weather. You can't change the world, but you can change the world in you. And when the world inside you changes, you'll find yourself doing the things that do change the world that we all share, changing it for the better, along with others doing the same. You alone cannot create world peace, but you can be a peacemaker. You can't make the world a just and equitable place by yourself, but you can champion justice and fairness and equity. You can't make other people be kind, but you can practice kindness. So be the best you can be. Be the strongest, kindest, most fair and just and loving and compassionate person you can be right now. And again tomorrow. And the next day. And the day after that. Give today your best. I will too. Someday, there will be enough of us doing our best that the war won't start. That the injustice won't rise up to oppress someone. That kindness will greet each of us as we meet the day and one another. Then we all will have done what we could do, our best, and the world will have changed. Until then, keep doing your best. I will too. One of the ways we do our best every Sunday is to share with each other what is in our hearts, to let each other know that we need to be seen and held, and to quietly mark something that's going on in our lives or with the people we love. So we'll begin by quietly coming forward and placing a milestone stone in the bowl. And when that seems to have died down, we'll slowly come up and share things out loud that we need to share. For those of us who are joining us online, I invite you to let us know in the chat what your concerns are, and if they need to be spoken, Nancy will come up and offer them. I invite you to come share the milestones first. Joys and concerns and prayers and needs in the name of everything glorious and good as we enter into silence, each of us holding our own needs and those of the community we've heard in our heart. And we'll end our silence as Jerry brings us into singing Spirit of Life together.
This reading is from Church in the Inventive Age by Doug Paget. I'm calling us to find our place in a swiftly shifting culture, to consider how we need to change what we think, what we value, what we do, and how we do it. I'm calling us to be the church in the inventive age. We are not called to change for change's sake. We are called to live faithfully in the time and place in which we live. Living faithfully may require us to make changes in what we do, but changing our practices is not the point. Change only matters if it's based in an understanding of why that change is needed. If it's not, the only change you'll make is to trade one set of problems for another. When a culture changes, everything in the culture changes, not all at once, but over time. The tensions we are seeing in American religion, declining membership in mainline churches, fractious relationships between evangelicals and mainliners, An untapped spiritual hunger among young adults. Point to the discomfort change brings with it. And I invite Kristen to come up. And the Disaster Relief Fund. Yeah. Oh, okay, Margaret. Okay.
Hi. I have a tool belt as part of my costume, but you'll have to hang around for 5 minutes afterwards because it just wasn't practical to wear in the seat in here. It's pretty heavy too. Whoops, just one sec. Moving slowly into the 21st century. So today's Share the Plate will be split 50-50 between UUCD and the UUA's Disaster Relief Fund, which is accessible to UU congregations experiencing usually natural disasters, but some kind of large unanticipated expense. I just want to read their statement. They put out a special plea about a month ago saying that they usually try to keep $100,000 on hand, but their balance was down to $30,000 because there have been a lot more natural disasters, which are at least partly attributable to climate change. This year, they have granted over $275,000, probably higher than that by now, which is the highest amount in a single year for the last 5 years. And the year's not over yet. So they were asking for donations, and it seemed like the least we could do to help our siblings in need. So half of today's collection will go to the UUA Disaster Relief Fund. Thank you.
So, we are generous people, and through our generous giving, we help to sustain each other by making sure this congregation has what it needs to serve our members and our work in the community. If you're with us for the first time, your presence here is your gift to us. Members and friends, please express your generosity by using the link or QR code that's posted in the chat or projected on the screen. You may also mail a check to UUCD at 24 Clapperridge Road in Danbury. And thank you for doing your part to support and sustain this community that we love. Okay.
In a couple months, my mom will turn 88. 8 years ago, when she turned 80, she sold the home I grew up in and moved into a tiny little 3-room senior housing complex apartment in Leominster, Massachusetts. She also created a revocable living trust so that when she dies or becomes incapacitated and cannot make decisions, my brother and I, as the successor trustees, the terms you know when you have to do this stuff, become the acting trustees. So we've already come into our very meager and tiny inheritance. Setting all this up was relatively easy. My childhood friend became a lawyer. His partner does estate law. Boom, we're all set up. We're done. That was easy. What was really difficult was telling her we didn't want any of the stuff from the house. Other than some of the things she was going to bring with her, we had no interest in anything else. And it was heartbreaking to have to tell her that if she wasn't moving it with her, we were going to give it away, donate it, or throw it away as best we could, whatever it was. When she finally passes, I'll probably take a couple of my aunt's paintings, a wreath my grandmother made out of shells, and maybe if there's room for it, the bureau that my great-grandmother brought from Santa Maria in the Azores to New Bedford in 1898. That's it. I did not want all the 6 Afghans my grandmother had made. I did not want a huge carved bookcase given as a gift sometime in the distant past. I just didn't. Neither did my brother. And you know what? Not wanting your parents' stuff is the new normal. It's become a thing. If you haven't run into this already, you will. The generations that came after the baby boom are famously less interested than their predecessors in the trappings of domestic life, says Elizabeth Stewart, author of No Thanks, Mom, the top 10 objects your kids don't want and what to do with them. Generation X and millennials often don't want to polish silver or hand wash china, Stewart says. They're also typically not interested in dark, heavy furniture, books, photo albums, vintage linens, or someone else's collection of anything. When culture changes, it affects the way everything goes, including the way we pass things down from generation to generation. It's not that people no longer love their parents. I love my mom, or respect their parents. I respect my mom. My mom raised 2 boys as a single mom. I mean, right there, she's done. She's earned it all. But what isn't considered valuable can change when the world we live in changes. Many of those heirlooms and china sets were treasured in a world where one income could provide for an entire family, where housing was relatively easier to find and less expensive and more affordable. I don't own a home. I live in a parsonage. Same is true for my son. He doesn't own a home. The only reason my brother owns a house is that a friend of his sold it to him 10 years ago, way under market value, because he was a really good friend and wanted and needed to go. The world we live in handed us lives that have us needing, if not wanting, to do things differently. And so as it is happening in families with homes and heirlooms and Afghans, so it is also happening in congregations and faith communities. I think a typical characteristic of a vibrant, long-lived congregation is that they excel at giving their congregation away to the next generation in a way that works for the new generation. They understand that the next generation may not want their stained glass windows or pipe organ or historical artifacts or even the 7 principles. they understand that expressions of faith change with times. They understand that they will do things differently, if not out of choice, out of necessity. We like to look at church congregations, right, as a family, including the passing of the torch from one generation to the next. And for a while now in American religious life, seeing that next generation seems difficult and sparse. But it will change. There's a demographic shift underway that will most likely have faith communities of all types seeing some increase in younger adults who are parenting for the first time in a generation. One of the things that elders do in a church is they work hard to build a life and legacy, and they want to pass it on. But like my mom, they sometimes find out the way their descendants want to carry on the heritage is different than the way they envisioned passing on the heritage. So I didn't want my grandmother's Afghans. I didn't want a big carved bookcase. What I do know how to do is cook all the traditional meals and food my great-grandmother brought with her from Santa Maria. And I'm the only one of my generation, all my cousins and everything, that knows how to do it still. The only one. And I had to learn it from my aunt. My mom, God bless her, is not a cook. So I learned it from my aunt and my grandmother. And I cherish those. I love cooking, and that's my stuff. And I remember when my mom and my aunt inherited my grandparents' house back in the 1980s. They made a ton of changes to it, which my mom couldn't seem to remember when I didn't want the Afghans. They made so many changes. The front room with the TV where my grandfather watched the Red Sox games became the dining room. My grandfather's shop and office, he was an electrician, became the new TV room and living room and gathering space. The old outhouse, the house was built in 1836. The old outhouse was a storage shed for years. And they made it into glory to the gods, an outdoor shower. Outdoor showers are the best. And after all the changes, grumpy ghosts of my grandparents never bothered to show up and complain. They were cool with it all. Many congregations in recent years have struggled to attract and build the next generation. Sometimes it feels like there's not going to be that generation coming next to pass things on to, but there will be. And helping them find what works for them is going to be our job. I think younger generations, like they always have, see old habits and old ways of thinking, typically to be let go of in some way. It is the way of things. And if people who are new anywhere get a sense that any contribution they have to offer is not going to be wanted or accepted, they tend to drift away. Hence, congregations that are vibrant and long-lived tend to be really good at giving the congregation away to the next generation as soon as they can. And maybe some of the things we can work on to help that process along, to help what you've already started, because we do a lot of things that are going into the future here. And one of the things that may help is take a look at how we bring people into the congregation, really figure out what we need them to know so they'll honor and value the past, and then can create the future they need to. The church's younger family, the younger generation, does not ask for the heirlooms and the mementos as much as the generous freedom to do with the inheritance what the life and situation of the congregation in their time will demand. And that's our big task. If we get stuck or hung up on how that next group is going to do things, then we might tend to cling too tightly to our own preferences over time, so that the children grow up and move away and aren't interested in the homestead. And we don't want to do that. One of the things that really helps is passing on the inheritance before you pass on, in a sense, to set up that living trust with the people who are new that come in here. So start thinking, all of us, let's start thinking about what it is we want to leave to who's next. Not that we can't have things we enjoy or things we want to do too, that's fine. But let's start to put some real energy and creativity into what it is we want to leave to who's coming next and how we want to leave it to them. One of the things we can do as best we can is leave them what financial resources we can. If you have already included the congregation in your will, excellent, thank you very much. If you have not thought about that already, please do so. Legacy giving. To make legacy giving an encouragement to think about it a regular part of our congregational life. It's never too late to start a family business. We might leave a family business to those who come next. An income generating entrepreneurial ministry that does something good and helps us make money to fund the congregation. And some of the things you might remember is, I think on my first Sunday with you, I showed you the lavender farm run by the Unitarian congregation in Checkafalva. I think we have a slide. There it is. So in case you didn't remember or weren't here, a former church I served had a partner congregation in Transylvania. And one of the things I did when I went there is I worked on the lavender farm because it's part of how they fund their congregation. Fascinating. They have a gift shop, and they sell things out of the shop, and they sell things to local tourists and local tourist spots. And that's really cool. What else do we got there? Do we have another slide? There it is. There's the lavender shop. Excellent. And one of the places I ran into during my years in Hopedale, Mass, before I came to Connecticut, was a Methodist clergy group that ran a thing called Simple Church. And this was a church that met on a weeknight for dinner. That was the church service. They had vegan soup and homemade bread, and they sang songs, and they were Methodist. They read a Bible passage, and instead of a sermon, everybody shared on it. That this was their weekly, like, Sunday service. And part of how they served this community is they baked bread, they sold it at farmers markets and all that other kind of stuff. And they also created websites for other congregations. I think we got a slide of maybe one of their websites. Yeah, so one of their income generating things is they had a team in the congregation that created websites. They were website creators and consultants, and that's another way they made money. When I was down in Texas, because there's a certain branch of religion that's been doing this a lot longer than liberal religion has, you ran into a lot of income generating ministries. One of my favorites was this food truck from St. Isidore Episcopal Church in Houston. St. Isidore has no walls. They don't have a building. They meet in public places, restaurants, parking lots, parks with homeless people. And how they fund it is they run a food truck. It's awesome. An evangelical pastor I became friends with in Texas told me about something he knew, which was called the Greater Purpose Community Church in Santa Cruz, California. They run a brewery to help fund the congregation. No lie. You know, the local craft brewery has exploded in Connecticut in the last generation. I think every town here is supposed to have 2 by law or something at this point. But yeah, funding a church through a local brewery. And at a conference, someone told me about Scotchman Coffee Roasters, an income generating ministry of the Living Water Lutheran Church in Clark Fort, Idaho. Look at that. This is part of the ways these congregations fund their church. Pretty cool, huh? If you had told members of this congregation 20, 25 years ago that congregations now help fund themselves by running a brewery or roasting coffee, I don't know if they'd believed us. Things change. Maybe we can leave a family business to those who come next. What is it we can do? I don't know. Maybe it will be a concert series, was my actual next line right there. I can show it to you. I'm not making that up. You know, our congregation, all congregations, we know they're going to be very different in the years ahead, right? Oh, we're going to get to Reverend Joe in just a minute. COVID forced a lot of rapid changes for congregations. And the future, as it rolls increasingly more rapidly, is going to keep doing that to us. We've got a good start on rolling with the changes. Let's keep that going. And this goes beyond just being willing to try some new things. It means allowing for real experimentation, prototyping, failure. It means being willing to do things that may not work for me personally, but will work for those who come next. I'm not exactly sure how we figure out what that is or how that balances, but we can do that. In a series of books, Church in the Inventive Age, Community in the Inventive Age, Preaching in the Inventive Age, our reading today, Doug Pagitt, pastor of the non-denominational Solomon's Porch Church in Minneapolis, he places contemporary faith on a continuum of what he calls 4 time periods. The idyllic age is very pastoral, isolated little congregations in the farmland. The industrial age, when with the industrial age and mass production came denominations, right? We're going to mass produce that church in the countryside. They're all going to be similar and roll off the assembly line. And then the electronic age, where things went online and to TV and different things. And now he says we're in the inventive age. And the inventive age is one in which inclusion, participation, collaboration, and beauty are the essential values. To succeed in the inventive age, he says, means to be entrepreneurial to the core, to be willing to be constantly evolving, future-focused, lateral, non-hierarchical, open-sourced, permission-granting, to borrow and use the forms and traditions of the past, but never be held hostage to them as you hold them lovingly. And this is where some congregations have a difficult time moving into this new age. One of the difficulties that COVID brought to us with its kind of forced changes in how we did congregational stuff was that, by and large, lots of contemporary congregations were designed to work in a world that doesn't really exist anymore. Like, why do we have church at 11 a.m. on 10 a.m., whatever, on Sunday morning? Because that was the time in the day the farmer could stop, take a lunch break, go to the church, and then come back and work in the farm in the afternoon. Now we just do it because, well, that's the way we've always done it. The 7 last words of every congregation. Last weekend at the Unconference in Meriden, Margaret was there. Where's Margaret? Margaret attended. We talked about some things that Unitarian Universalists might not even have thought of 20 years ago. Thriving in the future is going to depend on how well we network and actively cooperate with other congregations, not just UU congregations, but congregations of any kind that share our values. And there are lots of them these days. We discussed a Connecticut statewide Unitarian Universalist lobbying effort, which could take the form of creating a state UU action network, like there are in some other states, or by formally joining together with umbrella organizations that are currently pulling together all kinds of progressive coalitions in Connecticut to all help each other with legislation in the State House. We talked about the possibility of hiring staff together, not just ministers that might work with another congregation, but chipping in together to create a job with enough hours and enough money to get bookkeepers or office administrators or a communications director. And that stuff can be done for Connecticut by someone sitting at a desk in Kansas these days. We talked about doing fundraisers with other congregations so that a combined team could put on a larger fundraiser than we could do by ourselves. We talked about truly upscaling our social media, maybe working on that together. Because, you know, email and Facebook are old technologies, right? My son is 27 years old. He has never sent me an email, not once in his entire life. Email has existed his entire life. He never uses it. It's an old technology. I get gobs of text messages from him, but never an email. Maybe we cooperate with other congregations in creating UU messages for new short form video like TikTok. And this is where we had Reverend Joe up there. So this is Reverend Joanna Fontaine Crawford in Round Rock, Texas, Live Oak UU Church. If you have TikTok, look her up, Rev Joe UU. And if you don't, just go on the internet and look up on the internet like this. She is starting to become our first legitimate social media star. She's an early adopter. I've known her for a long time, and she's always into the next thing. And when she started TikTok, she'd do the usual UU stuff. We'll talk about our values and our progressive nature and all this stuff. But then Jamie Lee Curtis, of all people, forwarded one of her TikToks. Overnight, she gained 20,000 TikTok followers. Shortly after that happened, one of those new followers was an evangelical fundamentalist Christian troll who has now made her one of the #1 public enemies in the fundamentalist religion internet sphere. And the conversation she gets into will make you crack up, laugh out loud, fall out of your chair holding your stomach. And then she started getting called all these names, like a dirty heretic. So now whenever she gets called a new name, her husband designs a cocktail with that name. The dirty heretic is sweet cherry juice, simple syrup, gin, and grated ginger. A dirty heretic. It's a dirtier heretic if you add the olives. But this is carrying our message. You know, she has almost 60,000 followers now. You know, it's not Taylor Swift's 3 million or whatever, but for a UU preacher in the middle of nowhere, Texas, who caught a lucky break, there are all kinds of new things we can do, you know? It just takes all of us to really use our imagination, not be afraid to throw those ideas out there and not be afraid to try things and let a few of them just fall on their face. The worst thing we can do is fail miserably. We've all done that before. We get up and keep going and try something else. The future of faith communities is what we're already doing. It's always going to be, for the foreseeable future, both an online and in-person operation. In his latest blog post, Kerry Nyoff, who's a church consultant guru guy, he says, what we're noticing is that, especially in the wake of COVID quarantine, online presence and marketing is driving demand for in-person experiences, because the line between what happens online and in real life continues to get thinner and thinner and thinner year by year. How does this work? Well, he cites Taylor Swift. He says, using brilliant digital marketing, Taylor Swift sold more vinyl records in 1 week in 2022 than the Beatles, Elton John, or Queen ever did in 1 week, back when vinyl was the only way you listened to music. Think about that for a second. And she sold 2 million tickets to her last concert so fast it broke the online Ticketmaster sales website. And the people weren't buying tickets to be online. They were buying tickets to be in person. How our online experience drives what happens here. And if we have cool stuff here, we use our available marketing opportunities to tell people about them and get them here. And that's what Reverend Joanna has been doing. Nyoff also says that the type of church experience that is now drawing people is not the old worship experience featuring a sermon. No more sympathy than that? Oh. It's a community-centered experience, all ages inclusive, featuring connection and experiences that don't necessarily translate online. You can watch live music online, but it's not the same as being there with live sound in the room. And those experiences are bringing people in and back in droves since quarantine ended. One of the things we talked about at the unconference was the need to have these entrepreneurial income generating projects that we might work on with other congregations. Somebody suggested, which sounded silly at first, the more I thought about it was really interesting, a fall foliage tour where there was like a B&B stay at a couple different congregations or set up in congregations and took people to different sites and restaurants and different sites. Very interesting idea, but that's the kind of brainstorming thing that starts of, that'll never work. And a ways down the line has been refined enough that somebody hits on something. The more we talk to each other, not just here, but with our other UU congregations, the more we can do. The generation that returned to congregational life in person the least after COVID was baby boomers. Most was Gen Z. There's a shift coming we've been waiting for a long time, I think, to see younger people and more children again coming to congregations. And I think we're going to see that in the years ahead. So let us think deeply about what inheritance to leave to them. What are we going to give to the next generation of the UU congregation of Danbury? Because what we decide about that will help make or break what they're able to do. The biggest thing we can do is just trust the people who come next to do it well, respect what's gone before, and carry on as they need to. They may not want our china or our bulky furniture, but they will honor and love what you've built and what we create together. Love them enough to let them do it their way and help them get started. They may not want to use an order of service. They may want to sit on couches instead of chairs. They may want to eat their breakfast right in the room where the service is taking place. They may not want to line up to volunteer for the same things in the same way. They may move the weekly service to dinner time on Wednesday night. They may do away with an annual pledge drive and just send a reminder for membership dues once a year. Doesn't matter. That's theirs to do. Ours is to grant them the permission to start going that way. No matter how different their expression of congregation is, it really is, however, the heart of liberal religious tradition that they will inherit from you, that you are the guardians of, that you will really pass on to them. Inclusion. We're always learning to be more inclusive. Thank you for the reminder, Randy. I'm still not used to that. I'm a big fat guy with a goatee and a weird costume on. I'm not used to it, but it's right. But it's right. Be more inclusive. We want to be more inclusive all the time. Democracy. We want to spread that inclusion to how we make decisions. We use multiple and various sources of spiritual wisdom from the human tradition. We value kindness and peacemaking, honoring the planet on which we live and saving its life. This is what you'll pass down to them that they will treasure the most, like I treasure my recipes. It's not a thing. It's a spirit. And that's the greatest thing we have to pass on, our liberal religious heritage. And for all those who have come before, our hymn of celebration is number 103 in the gray hymnal for all the saints. The words should also be on the screen. So please rise in body and spirit as you are willing and able, and join in the singing of our hymn of celebration. Join in the words of our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish Don't forget to stop downstairs to the Prancing Pony stall at the Table or Treat, because not only do I have gummy bears, I have car magnets with UU on them for the people who have vehicles.